Hi, thanks for watching. As many of you already know, Ellen and I are part of a research group from various parts of the country. We've been together now for 4 years plus, and unlike other research groups, we actually meet up once a year. And we have enjoyed each other's company immensely over 3 long weekends for the last 3 years, but this year we pushed the boat out and lived in an old world house in a Starfort for a week. And I'll show you where we went. And this is Edinburgh, and it's barely 50 miles south of Edinburgh. Right. And this is Berwick upon Tweed. So now I'll show you the house itself. And here it is here. Right, and the first thing I thought of is that, well, at one time that was one house. Right, in fact, when I was talking to the owner, Chris, on the phone, I says to him, "Would you like more rooms, Chris?" And he said, "Oh, aye." I says, "Well, clear out your 2 basements." And he just laughed. I don't think he realised I was being serious. So I'll give you a quick tour of the interior of the house. This is the living room, which we never used, not once. And there was 5 bedrooms, and we spent most of our time sitting around the kitchen table or out in the patio out back. Right. And as we were there for a week, there was plenty of time, so we could have a walk around the Starfort at our leisure. And there is also an abundance of mud in Berwick, and that's the front of that building. Right, another thing. There were also 3 graveyards in the area where I could continue my search for old dead people, because the majority of stones in the UK and the majority of graveyards, they're dated 19th century. And I'm on a quest to find older dead people. And this is 1765 and J 780. So I've got videos in mind to show these walks, but something else happened, and the patio I showed you, there was a conversation taking place there one time, and one of the members asked them to hold their thoughts and would they mind making a video with their discussion, debate, and both agreed profusely that would be a great idea. So we set up the kitchen table and let them chat. So, Larry here, he came to visit because through a member of the group he knew where we were, and he has an interest in Starforts. But as I say, he had a chat with Kathy, and both of them agreed to have the chat on camera and have it recorded. Right, some food for thought before they discuss high tides. This is the ball, and this is the equator, and you'd imagine with a spinning ball that the high tide would be at the equator, but the Bay of Fundy, where it can reach 40 feet, it's way up here in Canada. And that's what happens to them. Right now. And from this site, journeys, which I'll put a link in the description, the 5 locations with the highest tides in the world. And Bay of Fundy, which we just checked out, up in Nova Scotia. On the other side of there, we have Quebec and the Bristol Channel, each way away from the equator. And then Alaska, and Rio Gallegos, Argentina, is actually in the same area as the Falklands in the South Atlantic. Right, so I'll let you hear the chat now. Floor's yours, guys.
Right. Okay, so shall we start with a conversation that we had out there?
Should we introduce ourselves?
Yeah,
we can edit all this and all that, can't we?
got
So,
it.
who are you?
So, I'm Kathy, and I think the Earth is probably flat.
And I'm Lawrence, and I think it's probably round.
Like
Probably.
a plate.
No. No. Like a pear, or like a pear.
Do you actually think that it's like a ball, a pear? What?
It's not. I wouldn't say truly spherical.
Right. Okay.
I think if you imagine a ball in motion spinning, you are gonna get some sort of a bulge in the middle.
Right. Now, my thought is that yes, you would get a bulge in the middle, so I'm not disagreeing with that. But I think fluid, and 75% of the Earth is fluid,
Of the surface,
in theory. So I think, well, and there's a lot of fluid underneath, because even if it's magma.
Oh yeah, so but when we're talking,
So when we're
most people
talking
talk
land,
surfaces.
you know, we're talking,
like
or solidity,
one-third.
we're talking a very small amount. But anyway, I'm thinking, and we did have this conversation as well, I'm thinking that the first thing that would start bulging is the water. I think there would be a bulge, more of water at the equator.
Yes, the first thing probably would be water. However, if the rest of the underneath bit is fluid, hot magma or whatever we're led to believe, then surely that would bulge too. And with that, so would the land. And you have to think, if it's been going around for a long time, there would be some sort of, it would need to balance itself to create a smooth spin, rather than a wobbly.
And do you think that it's achieved that?
No,
Right,
no.
so it hasn't achieved what you would imagine it would achieve if it was spinning, because it's not equal land, is it? It's not a nice rim
it's
of
not.
land all the way round.
That does disturb me.
Right, okay,
That actually disturbs
that's
me.
a fair point.
That it's
It should be.
It's not equally distributed, and if we take the theory of plate tectonics into account, then if we've got all of the continents interlocking, so we've got Brazil locks into Africa, and then that locks into other bits, and you can make the
sort of Pangea, all fitting together at one time.
If that's all in one place, and you've got it spinning, it's going to be wild, isn't it? It's going to be a wild ride, that.
I would have thought so.
Yeah, well off centre. Because your mass is off centre.
Yeah.
Unless the water's balancing it out. That is a point.
It is a point, but then you would see. I would think. This is one of the reasons. It's way down the list. I've got a much better, sort of reasons for why I would think it's flat. But I mean, way down the list there is the fact that if it was spinning, I would think that the water would bulge. Primarily, the water's going to be pulled. Fluid's going to be pulled before the mass attached to the body of Earth. So that's going to be pulled. Therefore, you're going to get your higher tides there. And science shows us, shows us that actually the high tides are primarily north, more so south, but your lowest tides are actually at the
Yes.
equator.
And this does indicate that we're not on a globe.
Right, okay. So, yeah, which I've got full respect that, you know, nevertheless, I know you're confident about your model, but but I respect the fact that you said that, because the other point that I made as well is that with the solar system, as we both established, that is flat, you know, that's
we
all going around.
believe so.
And you've got the moon that just goes either, you know, it goes around, it takes the same path as the sun between Tropic Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn and at the equator. So it's only going to drift between those as it's going in its elliptical orbit. Again, if the moon's gravity is responsible for the tidal turns, then that's two reasons why there should be a higher tide at the equator,
Yes.
which we don't get.
Agreed.
So now that isn't evidence it's flat. All we're really talking about is it a ball. That's not like this is why it's flat. But evidence against the ball would be the high tide, low tide being primarily north, in my opinion. I would say that indicates that it's not the moon. The moon is not responsible. The moon's gravity is not responsible for the tidal turns. And I would say that it you know, it's not likely to be spinning because it just doesn't come out the way you would imagine.
Yeah.
So that's
So my argument, and we did discuss this earlier, is with
yeah.
this obviously for the camera, we're sort of kind of repeating our discussion
we
from
are,
earlier.
yeah.
And because our friends that are with us today found this absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
So my argument there was that we don't get as much tidal movement around the equator because of the flow of the water.
Yeah.
If there was a canal, let's put a canal around the equator, then it would be more at the equator. Unfortunately, we've got landmass in the way. We've got Central America, or northern Brazil, wherever the equator, I can't remember exactly where it is. But so we've got landmass there that stops the water from continuing around from the Atlantic into the Pacific. But then the Pacific, we're all right until we sort of like, well, we've got Polynesia, haven't we? That sort of, that is where we should be looking, really. On that, if we imagine the model as a globe, then maybe at that sort of longitude, have we got the right one right?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's longitude.
So at that longitude, and that's maybe where we should be looking at the tidal differences, north and south and equatorial.
Yeah.
Because that's where we've got the most open water coming into a tidal effect that we're saying is caused by the gravitational pull of the moon and the sun.
Yeah, and the sun, yeah.
Yeah, because when they're in alignment or when they're opposed.
When they're in alignment, you get what's called spring tide. It's got nothing to do with spring.
Yeah.
But it's,
yeah.
You know, yeah.
Yeah. The equinox. Is it equinox? Or not the equinox, you've got the spring and the autumn.
Yeah, you've got spring tide is just where the moon and sun happen to align. Then you've got a weighted gravity thing. Now that is actually true that when the sun and moon are in alignment, you do tend to get greater tides.
So this should be
throughout.
happening really every month.
Which it pretty much does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We get a lot.
That's why I said
then,
it's got nothing to do with spring. I'm not sure why they call it, because you got I think it's called neap tides, which are particularly low ones, and spring tides, which are higher ones.
Yes.
But it's got nothing to do with spring.
No.
But I think it's got more to do with spring.
Yeah.
I don't think spring has got anything to do with spring. I think it's called spring because that's when things start to spring up.
Yeah.
I think that's why it's
The
called
power's
that.
released
So,
in the
but
spring.
that's my opinion.
Yeah.
You know, so I can see why. But I'm just saying that.
So then we have to kind of look. Really, when should we be getting the high tides? Now, on the spherical model and the plane of the solar system, we're saying that the highest tides are when we're at the average point away from the sun, because we have the closest point when we're having our winter, and Australia, the southern hemisphere, would be having its summer, and the furthest waypoint is when we have our summer, which is why our summer isn't as hot, allegedly, as
But
the
see,
southern
from
hemisphere.
my understanding, that actually makes no difference whatsoever.
So the spring,
and this is the thing. So if you look at the tides, let's say Yarmouth,
but I would say really we should be experiencing it in our winter. Should be the highest tides.
Yeah.
Because we're actually closer to the sun then.
Yes.
Which disproves
in theory.
kind of like the
you just disproved your own model.
Well, not
not disproved
I've
it.
not disproved
But
it.
you've just given me more ammo.
Well, yeah,
That's very kind of you.
That's fair enough. But what I'm saying is,
and I hadn't seen that one.
Yeah. So it doesn't disprove it.
No, it doesn't disprove it.
No.
But you did just give me more ammo.
I know I gave you more ammo.
I'll see
because
if I can help you out along the way then.
I would like to have a better knowledge.
Yeah.
And I don't think we can have a better knowledge
without discussing it.
without
which
discussing
is why
it,
we're
and without
discussing
having
it.
opposing points of view.
Yeah.
Because if we all accept your model,
Oh yeah. I haven't
then we
really
gain
got
no
a model
knowledge.
Anyway.
we don't bother looking at it.
No.
If we all accept my view, we don't bother looking at it.
Oh.
We can't have discussion, debate, enjoyment that we get from discussion and debate.
Yeah. It's
Because
fun.
we
It's fun.
we do have.
Yeah. So we've gone through the tides, and the tides do not.
Yeah. Now,
I mean, we haven't really looked at in what way would that prove it's flat, but we have looked at. Really, we're just looking at
geography at the moment.
Geography, the globe, the moon's gravity, turning the tide, that it becomes less likely that that's the cause. So you could still, in fairness, you could still have.
Either.
No, but we could still have a spinning globe, and we will perhaps could just say, well, actually, maybe it's not the moon that's responsible.
We could indeed.
For turn tides, because we talked about the moon is a quarter of the size of the Earth, and its centre of gravity is strong enough, according scientifically, to actually turn the tides. Therefore, everything has a centre of gravity, and that's why I said to you, if you were near like Mount Everest, that's so much larger than you, it has its own centre of gravity.
Which I agree with.
It's far more than 4 times,
but then,
bigger than you, and yet there's no gravity.
Everest's centre of gravity, Everest's gravity is far less than the globe. So
it's far less than the globe.
Would you feel the effect of the magnetism of Everest?
Well, here's the problem, isn't it? Because mathematically, this is exactly how maths is worked out. That if you can work out that 2 plus 2 is equaling 4, it doesn't matter whether it's 2 elephants or 2 ants. But it doesn't matter if it's 2 elephants, 2 ants, they'll apply the same thing. So this is why I'm saying, if the moon is a quarter of the size of Earth, each has a centre of gravity, a quarter of the size, even though it's 234,000 miles away, it has enough of a pull that it can turn our tides. Then I am saying that if scientifically everything has a centre of gravity, then something that is 4 times bigger than you should have the same sort of pull on you, and it doesn't. At least it should do on your fluid.
No.
So you don't see that.
No, the same way that every time we walk past each other, we don't bump into each other. We're not pulled towards each other.
No, but I'm not 4 times bigger than you.
So if we put everybody in the room in one spot and I walk past them, I would not necessarily collide with them all.
No.
Which you're kind of saying you would.
Yes, I am.
But you don't get stuck to the wall in the room.
Exactly. So why do we think the gravity on the moon is capable of turning the tides?
But we're talking a lot more.
A lot more what?
Size, and we're talking you're opposing forces of similar sizes. aren't you? So you're talking the opposing force of the Earth against the Moon and the Sun, and realistically, it doesn't. Okay, so yeah, we're kind of possibly got a bit of a struggle with the Moon being its own, being the true singular source of gravity, of tidal movement.
Yeah, because I think the fact that there are generally, not always, but generally, on a regular basis, the higher tides are always in the north. I think it's got more to do with something going on at the North Pole.
Right.
And of course you've got a lot of fresh water coming out of there, and you've got the whole jet stream thing, which is the explanation for why there are higher tidal turns there. But I don't think it should be if it's spinning. That doesn't sit well with me.
No.
No,
I can understand that.
So yeah.
I can understand that. And we were also discussing the fact that land mass and land shape can interrupt the flow of water.
Yeah.
And
wind.
Wind,
which obviously
indeed.
Carries water along. So yeah.
And we were sort of saying that also because we don't have a free canal around the equator, the water can't freely move around the equator, especially, and I was saying that the Americas, so we've got North America and South America, and covers a large singular, although it does the same in not so much South Africa and Europe and Russia.
Yeah.
There's a lot of landmass stopping it from freely moving.
Yeah.
So I was saying that the free movement of water would assist tidal movement height in tidal heights.
Yeah.
And you were also saying that some areas had more than 2 tidal movements a day.
there are. I think it's near Mexico has about 4, but even in Cornwall, I think they have 3 or 4 as well. But that could, even I had recognised that, it could be a backflow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean.
But then it's only a backflow because of land distribution.
Yes.
Not because.
Yes.
Of the Earth spinning round,
So we were saying that Mexico being near the equator, the water moves up to it and then it's stuck, so it's got a backflow.
Yeah.
And then it's going up to it again, 12 hours later, and then backflow.
Yeah.
And sloshing around, basically, we're going backwards and forwards, this water.
Yeah.
This volume of water, and on both sides, because we've got the reverse happening on the Pacific side as well as the Atlantic side.
But see, all of this sloshing around, my thoughts are that it's more likely there's something going on underground. I think we've got a lot of heat underground. I don't think the heat is due to rotation. I think it's due to fermentation, because every time something dies, you end up with a kind of like the gardening effect. If you keep on
the compost
piling
is
compost
warm.
and everything. Well, and there's some instances where it just ignites.
Yes.
In big fields where you've got all the compost, it has just
when you've got a large volume of it.
You have got a large volume. You think of all the fish and that die, the stink of that and all the gases that are.
I tend to stay away from them.
Yeah. But the point is that's why I think we've got heat underground, not due to rotation. But I do think it's all funneled, I think it's very, not happenstance, very organised, and that heat is building up under the water, and I think that is probably flowing north, and when it flows north, it's boiling, it's distilling, if you like, the water. So when you get the jet streams, which is always fresh water, and you've got all the geysers that are in Iceland and all dotted around that area where they're regularly coming up, and they can be timed, and that's got nothing to do with the moon. And they just come up on a timer, and I think something similar is happening, and it blows. Now there have been images, albeit conspiracy images if you like, of that kicked off the hollow Earth theory, because they thought a hole had been detected at the North Pole. I think it acts more like a valve. So every so often it opens, and you've got this jet of fresh water coming up, because the heat below it has distilled and boiled it, and it builds up and builds up and builds up, and then the valve opens, and
There's a lot
and
of...
then as that comes over, there's where your tidal turns begin, because you've got this influx of water coming in, and it's going up the coastlines, and that's your tide in, and then slowly it starts to recede back down again, because of course you've got different areas like holes under the ocean that are sort of dragging it down, and it kind of drains it back down, and as it's draining it down, you've got all the next round of fermentation, building up heat, and I think it works regular as clockwork, but I think it's happening underground. Now that's just my theory.
That is a fantastic
cannot...
theory though, because I think we discussed the other day about the child's toy, the toy boat.
Yeah.
Basically, the boat has two pipes that lead from the stern of the boat,
Yeah,
both pointing backwards,
yeah,
and you have a little cabin in the middle, and you put the tea light in, and basically you've got two metal plates, and they just expand and contract, and that.
yeah.
But the expansion is slower, and the contraction is quick.
Yes,
When the expansion happens, the heat is coming in, and the water
Builds
slowly builds up, draws up the pipe, and then it contracts the metal and
Yeah.
turns to steam, and it shoots it back down the pipe.
yeah,
And you light the candle, and the boat goes.
yes.
And
And
it
it
goes
relies
chunks.
on heat and water,
Yes.
you know, and I think that is what you've got under it. You've got the heat and you've got the water. So you've
Yeah.
got a layer of heat, a layer of water.
I can go with
and-
that.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can go
So
with that.
that's what I think.
Yeah.
But I don't think that relies on. So if that's the tidal, if that is the cause of the
No.
tidal turns, then that does not have to rely on gravity of any sort.
No.
It doesn't have to be the moon pulling on the tides at all. You can leave the moon out of it. I think the moon has a relevance in the world, you know, but that ain't it.
So, if we say that, then can we say, or can we theorise, or could we just say it's coincidental that it's in time with the moon's orbit around? Or as,
Well,
in fact, it's not the moon orbiting, it's
Yeah.
our turn, isn't it? As much as anything.
Well, yeah, but I mean, obviously, the moon has an elliptical orbit around
In fact, it's nothing to do with the moon.
us, but
The moon only orbits once every 4 weeks.
yeah,
Yeah. So, but the tides are happening every 12 hours.
I
or
know,
12 and a half.
I know.
So this is down to the spin, then, of the Earth. So are we saying that this possible expansion, contraction, pumping the water is in time with the moon or the turn of the Earth? On my model.
On your model, I would disagree with that, because I based everything on the idea that Earth doesn't need to be spinning. I think as you've got the fermentation going down, I think that's what's spinning. You've got pools, like whirlpools below you, and the whirlpools, of course, acts like the same way as any rotation. Like, you know, you've got your vacuum cleaner, you would fully expect that that's gonna, you know, draw things up.
So you're
because of
saying
the
then,
spin. So if you've got whirlpools, that's what we're calling gravity, is these whirlpools.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think it's one big massive whirlpool, because we'd all go just to the centre of that. I think you've got pockets.
well, you
but it
know,
would
these
have to be
scientists with their
pockets.
X-ray eyes have seen the solid metal core, and then the fluid. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not going
How the hell
with
did
a
they
solid.
see that? I
Yeah,
don't know.
they
but-
don't know.
No.
You know, so.
Yeah. But what
you
I'm
know,
saying there is that you're almost saying it's just coincidental then, that it's in time with the what I call the rotation
I
and
don't
the
see.
positioning of the moon.
What do you mean by it's in time?
Well,
Are
if
we
it's
talking
every
about
12, well, the tide,
the rising
so,
of the
yeah,
tide?
so the rising of the tides and the falling of the tides, you're saying is from the heat expansion of the water.
And what do you think it's?
Well,
in
if you're
time with?
if you're saying it's that, it's very coincidental to line up with the moon. Is the moon then causing?
It doesn't though. That would be my argument. If you look at the moon, so
We've got 13 degrees roughly every day difference in position.
yeah, and I'm sure it's out there right now.
Yeah.
I've got a
Thank
clue.
you.
I've
You've
got an
got a clue,
idea
yeah.
that it's out there right now. But the thing is
But have we got high tide right now?
well, probably not. High tides tend to happen every 12 hours.
Well, I always thought 12 and a
approximately.
half approximately.
It is an approximation, and there's your point. They can tell you exactly where the moon's going to be, but they don't know exactly when the tide's going to rise.
Oh no, they do. They give you forecasts. You can get them.
And see the thing
But I haven't
is the
checked
forecast,
whether
yeah, and
the
you're going to have
forecasts
to
are
rely
accurate.
on me just for a little
No,
bit.
okay.
That if you look up how do you forecast the tide, they do it by sonar. You have sort of sticks
3 weeks in advance, though, or is there just an
Daily.
estimation?
daily.
But
It's a
then
daily,
but you,
so they
you
can
get a chart
estimate.
a month in
Yeah.
advance. Yeah.
They estimate roughly,
Yeah.
and then they tell you accurately on a daily basis.
Right.
So they give an accurate. It's a little bit like weather
I
forecasting.
think. Yeah.
They then give you an accurate one. Now at Yarmouth, when I looked up the tidal turns, and this is about 3 years ago that I was looking into this, and I picked just the day that I was making a video. You know, it's just so I could
Yeah.
show it there and then, and it was in June. So it showed that our tide was coming in at something like 6:38 a.m. and half hour up the road in Lowestoft,
Mm-hmm.
it was coming in a
Yeah.
whole hour
Yeah.
later.
Yeah. Yes.
That does not bear relevance to the moon. Now they're going to
But
have an
that
explanation.
does-
There is an explanation.
There is an
But
explanation.
the explanation doesn't rely on the moon, and you can look into how tidal turns were registered throughout the 1800s as well with different sticks. You know, so they knew as soon as it hit that point out in the ocean, that's it, tide's coming in. Because it was really important to know when the tidal turns were for you know, taking boats out, for the best fishing, for you know, transport and everything. So it was really important to know when
Yeah.
when they're turning.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah,
and it has to
both
be
of them
accurate, but it can only be accurate on a daily basis. That's an approximation. The approximation is roughly every 12, possibly 12 and a half hours. You know, two a day
Mhm.
approximately. But it doesn't work on a 24-hour cycle.
Mm-hmm.
The moon does.
Well,
You know, so
13
it's
degrees
sort of-
off. I mean, it's like so.
And we can say exactly where the moon is going to be. I presume you agree with that. That you can look up
Certainly.
a
predict,
year
yeah.
in advance.
Yeah.
You know, when's the
Yeah.
next eclipse?
Yeah.
When's this? When
Yeah.
you know, when's it going to look really big? When's it going to look red? When's it going to be a blue moon? When's it going to, you
Yeah.
know, that. Now, if I'm looking at how are you registering tidal turns, not once do NOAA, and that's, you've got NOAA and NASA and they're linked, and not once do NOAA ever look at the moon
Mm.
in
Right.
their equations for when the tide is turning. Now, if that's the thing that's responsible, I find that quite strange that that's not the thing
Yeah.
that they're looking at to work it out.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think this is coming in from the North Pole, and they don't know. You see, if an incredible amount of fish happen to die, more so than usual, or you've got a larger amount of fermentation, I think then you're going to have a greater pressure, it's going to build up quicker, and that's going to turn it slightly different. And that's going to be your slight equation. Now, if it works on valves, you're saying about why is it so timed, it's the same reason as your heart
Mm-hmm.
is timed, because it works on the same valve system.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
So, as I was saying about the heart valves, so if Earth is working on a similar principle, that it has valves, like a heart has valves, and basically it builds up, and then the pressure is releasing the valve, in the same way that you've got regular heartbeats, then that's why you're seeing the geezers.
And my
sort of-
expansion contraction fluid.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's working all on the same principle. I think that's how you're getting your fresh water.
Mm-hmm.
You're getting your fresh water, so you've got your fermentation that goes through all that process, and then you're getting your fresh water spill
Yeah.
over at the top, and that is what's causing it. Quite potentially at Antarctica, you've got something similar happening, and I only say that because if you look at where you can get the best freshwater fish, it's not only at Iceland, but you'll find that all
Tesco's
of
do it
the
as well.
southern, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. But you'll find that it's down like Patagonia
Yes.
and places like that as well.
Yeah.
But potentially that could also be some ice melt,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, that's where your freshwater inlet's
Yeah.
coming, and I think that's the whole point of the tides turning. I think everything happens for a reason,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a reason why the tides have to turn, because it has to bring in the fresh water and take down the fermentation,
Yeah.
and I think that's what's happening to
Okay.
keep things circulating.
Just to go back on the tidal movements, and particularly around the British Isles, I would say you need to be, or consider at least, the flow of water. You're going to get a lot that tend generally down like the North Sea. You'll get funneling.
Yeah.
So and
Yeah, well, they call it like a
well.
conveyor belt
Yeah,
anyway, don't
yeah.
they? So
They
I mean,
do
it's,
have the
it's
larger
not,
type,
Yeah,
the larger sea movements, don't they? The currents, the flows
yeah.
from like Antarctica up.
Yeah. Because I mean, you can even get maps of
Yeah.
it, can't you? Where you've got a blue arrow showing the fresh water in.
Yeah.
Well, they don't
I would-
call it fresh water; they call it cold water
Yes.
and hot water.
Yes.
I'm saying it's fresh water and fermented
Yes.
water.
And I think you would get the circulation,
yeah,
especially in like specific.
and that's what happens with your
specific-
blood. So really, water is Earth's blood,
Yes.
you know, and that's our
Yes,
connection to
yes.
Earth is through the water,
Yes.
and our blood does the same thing. You know, you're taking in fresh.
Mm.
You know, so every time you breathe, that's all clean blood, that's all filling your valves, and then it's going to do the whole circulation. And it's the same system. And I don't believe it relies on the moon. I don't believe it relies on gravity. Nor does it need the Earth to rotate. Nor does it need the Earth to be a ball.
But then everything does contribute, maybe, or even to a small degree.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would.
Yeah, everything's
I
interactive.
would go with.
Yeah, everything's interactive. You know.
We are
But,
part
yeah.
of the earth,
Absolutely.
and from the earth we've come.
Yeah.
And from the earth we shall return.
We will. And then, you know, all being well. we'll
Whether
work
it's
out
round or
exactly.
flat, it really, actually, is totally irrelevant.
It is irrelevant. What's relevant about it is if it isn't a globe that's spinning, that is
Yes.
a monumental lie.
Yes, definitely.
And then it's
Definitely.
it's the
If I've
the
been
reason we
totally
are alive.
programmed into believing a falsehood,
Yeah.
and the rest of the globe, well,
yeah.
you know,
And we've seen, I mean,
Yeah.
to be fair, and I think you'll agree, we have seen how easy people are.
I have
Brainwashed.
certainly over the last few days. We've only met. Well, we're 3 days in, are we?
3 days, yeah. So,
yeah.
and we agree that history
Oh,
is a lie.
I would certainly say so.
Yeah.
From what I've seen.
So 100% on that. So for me, it's not a huge step to think they're also lying about the blood. And as to why, and I did mention this, but you know, because I think if you say to anyone, you know, the Earth is not a globe, then the biggest question of all, it ends up coming down to, but why would they lie?
Yes.
I think it's useful to know that they would lie, which you do, in you know, in the first place.
Yes.
But I think the most logical reason for the lie is if you thought if I told you, that's it, I'm walling you off, you're not allowed beyond that wall.
Yeah.
The first thing you'd want to do is get
go beyond
the
it,
wall.
see what the
You'd
truth
be
is.
obsessed with how much can I get under it,
Yeah.
over it, can you distract them
Absolutely.
while I go over there?
Yeah.
The big plan your whole life would be to get the other side of that
Yeah,
wall.
and their big plan would
However-
be totally to distract you
Yes,
at
but
every possible
even
opportunity,
better
every
if they
possible
could
way.
convince you there's nothing behind the wall because it just goes all the way
It
around.
just meets in the middle.
And you would just
It
keep
meets in the
going round
middle
in
at that point
circles,
down
there's
there.
nothing else.
Yeah,
You can't go anywhere,
No.
there is nothing.
no. It's
Now-
nothing beyond.
You're not even going to think about
No.
getting beyond the wall because, so that's a perfect way to imprison people in an area because there is no way off. You know, once you're convinced there's no way off, there is nowhere to go, then you'll just settle down and do whatever. And I think it's highly suspicious that we're not allowed to go to Antarctica freely.
Considering, considering the treaty's been signed that it belongs to everybody,
Exactly.
so why are you not free to travel there?
So you're not free to travel there. So I find that highly suspicious. You know,
Definitely, I would agree with
if that were a perimeter, you know, you would want people not to go there,
Yeah.
and you would make up excuses. But it is a ball, you know.
Mm.
So that's my reasoning behind the why, because obviously I think that, you know, that they say there's infinite space. I think as far as we're concerned, we can assume that there is an infinite ocean with infinite bits of land coming off of those bits of ocean, and perhaps not all of them are enclosed. Perhaps some of them are very free, where you can go and live there and go there. And I also think that is an explanation. We've had visitations not from the space outside
terrestrial,
of
being
extraterrestrial.
terrestrial, being the area that we are led to believe is our world.
And where we've found like elongated skulls, which I think is genuine. You know, that you know, people have found elongated skulls.
And they've given us explanations
You know,
for those.
They have given us explanations
For binding the
having
kids, the
bound them
plank
and
the wood of
everything.
their head, back of their head.
You know,
Yeah.
but you know,
Who's going to
I'm
prove
not
them
sure.
wrong?
Yeah, I'm not
Hang
sure.
on, let me get a
that's
plank of wood.
So you know, I think there's been other species, larger species,
Yes.
whether they were native to here
certainly
or whether
evidence
they were.
of,
There certainly seems to be evidence of that.
yeah.
There's certainly evidence of larger animals, even if you want to call them dinosaurs. You know, whatever you want to call them.
I think there's larger animals that we have today, or in our more recent history,
Yeah.
there's evidence of larger versions of those as well.
Yes. Yeah. I
Yeah.
totally agree.
Post dinosaur.
By post dinosaur, yeah. So we're both on board with that. We've got no argument there. And I think other species, you know, I think there probably were dragons. I think probably still is. And
Could
I
well.
think they are probably on other lands.
Possibly.
You know, that's my opinion.
I would
But it's
like to
just an
say at this
opinion.
point to sort of, I suppose, to kind of round this area of subject up, because I'd like to go on to some other
Yeah,
discussions. But for this moment, I'm not opposed to the idea of a flat Earth,
Yeah.
and I can see your arguments for the flat Earth. I still struggle with my indoctrination for the global system.
Yeah.
For want of a better term of phrase.
No, so
yeah.
did I.
Yeah.
You know, you know, so
And
I totally say we respect
I
that.
can see where you are coming from.
Yeah.
I just want to hold on to just a little bit longer. Can I?
Yes.
Can I live on a
Of course
globe?
you can.
Thank
Of course
you.
you can.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Absolutely.
And I
Absolutely.
think at this
Yeah.
point we'll take a little break and then
Yeah.
come back with some more subjects, maybe leading on from what we've discussed earlier just now,
Yeah.
and just for editing purposes.
Yeah.
Thank you.